Hi, and welcome to another episode of Socratic Satsang. Our topic of discussion today is selfless acts. Our first speaker, Kirsten. Over to you, Kirsten.
Um, there's the idea that pure selflessness doesn't exist because the person acting always gets something out of the action, a good feeling, a sense of purpose, or some form of emotional reward. But if we accept that that there are selfish acts, that someone can act purely for their own benefit, then it seems the opposite would also exist, that someone can act purely for the sake of something or someone else. And looking at the word selfless itself, it appears to mean without the self, similar to how hopeless means being without hope. And we can never completely remove ourselves from our actions. The self is always present. So, a truly selfless act has to bypass the usual concerns of the self, the question of what do I get out of this, and focus entirely on the well being of others. And I think that there are examples of this radical self giving. I think of a mother who offers her entire body to her child, going through the discomforts of pregnancy, months of sacrifice, and the agony of labor, all to give life to someone else. She may enjoy the fruits of having a child, but the act itself, giving of her body, enduring pain, and risking her own safety, is something profoundly selfless. I also think of soldiers. They put their lives on the line for their families, their communities, and their country. And many of them go to war to protect people they've never met and maybe wouldn't even like. The motives may be complex. It can be duty, honor, a sense of responsibility, but the willingness to lose everything for others is undeniably selfless in its expression. I think a large part of this persistent idea that no act is truly selfless comes from the feel good paradox. The argument says that if doing something good for others makes us feel good, then the action wasn't selfless. It's must be done to get that emotional reward. But I think that's a misunderstanding of human nature. Feeling good after helping someone doesn't mean that you're chasing that feeling, that that's the motive behind the action. And I wonder if, in some way, it's evolution's way of reinforcing behaviors that help the group survive. That feeling good is kind of a built in reward system that encourages kindness. More importantly, many of the most selfless acts don't feel good at all. Think of running into danger to save someone else, donating anonymously without applause, standing up for someone at personal risk. All of these things can feel um, challenging. They don't feel good in the moment, and people do these things anyway. So I would challenge that the word selfless is not a zero self, but the act of thinking of the self less. And where the benefit to others is really the driving force and the self isn't the priority. So in the end, I do believe selfless acts exist, not because the self disappears in that, but because in moments of compassion, courage, and sacrifice, the self steps aside. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. Denise, over to you.
Thank you, Vin. So there's definitely some overlap based on what Kirsten had just talked about. I chose to do kind of a complete contrast between selfishness and selflessness. And I find it's often more nuanced than when we're taught. So many of us, especially women, carry that lifelong tension of being conditioned to care for everyone else first. from childhood onward, and especially in motherhood. As Kirsten had mentioned, we're told in subtle and explicit ways that our needs kind of come last, right? Like we're always putting our children first. And as a mother, I can honestly say that I would jump in front of a moving car for my daughter any day to make sure that she's okay. And yet that instinct to put others before ourselves is often framed as the highest moral ideal, as if kind of tending to our own well-being is somehow a failure of character. But this to me is where the story becomes a little more complex. So one of the things I've always believed is that we must look after ourselves in order to truly care for others. Even the ancient metaphysical traditions remind us of this. The mythology of Vesta, the Roman goddess associated with the Vestal Virgins or fire priestess. There's a teaching that speaks directly to this tension. And the quote from Beat Metz is, Vesta reminds us, first and foremost, that we belong to ourselves and are allowed to do so. She shows us how to regenerate, to activate our passion, and how to carefully watch over our inner fire in the storms of everyday life. So I was fortunate enough to spend some time at the Vestal Virgins Temple in the Roman Forum in Rome. And that message really resonates deeply. If we don't guard our own inner flame, how can we offer warmth and guidance or service to others? So and it doesn't seem like I can do a podcast without quoting Marcus Aurelius, but here we go. So even the Stoics echo that truth because he constantly returned to the idea that a person cannot act with virtue if their inner state is chaotic, depleted, or out of alignment. So strength of character requires that strength of self. And modern life, it mirrors this wisdom in the simplest ways. Even like when you get on an airplane and you're listening to the safety briefing, we're reminded to put our own oxygen mask on first before we help anyone else. And it's not an act of selfishness. It's an act of responsibility because if your true heart leans towards selflessness, then you must be appropriately selfish in order to sustain the capacity to give. If you're not mentally, physically, or emotionally supported within yourself, how can you fulfill the very desire to even care for others? So I leave you with this last thought. Perhaps then the line between selfishness and selflessness isn't a boundary at all, but a continuum, a living balance, if you will. And the real question isn't which one we choose, but how we honor both in a way that keeps our inner fire alive while still allowing it to light the way for others.
Thank you, Denise. Over to you, Tulip.
So when we say selfish, there are times that we have to make tough decisions or choices. So that's a decision to be made. It's like when Arjun had to make a decision, like a choice or a decision on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. This was against his own family. It was about his value system. That's one. But then you have the selfishness that's an inherent part of a person's nature. That's probably of a psychopath or a narcissist where it's all about them. So to me, that's being selfish. Then when you say selfless, and sorry, coming back to selfish, it's a person who doesn't understand or is not in touch with their conscience. Whereas when you're selfless, it's not about, it's doing something for someone, and feeling it, and the joy that you get because you're in touch with your conscience. It's the bhakti, bhakti yoga. That's the devotion. You're doing it because it's not for personal gain, but it's for the person. You're just happy. It's like when you're watching a match or if somebody wins a contest, you may even cry for the person. You may not know the person, but it's just feeling that happiness, or you're cheering for that person. So that's selfless. It's not about you, but it's just touching. You're touching, something that's really deep. And at the end, we all are connected, right? So it's being a part of that whole, that one. And something that Kirsten and Denise said, I would like to add. When Kirsten spoke about, in fact, both of you all spoke about motherhood and that being selfless. It's really funny, because sometimes when people ask, okay, you don't have kids, and isn't that being selfish? So I don't know where that comes from, because how is that being selfish? Like, it doesn't make sense. And the other, and when Denise mentioned about, obviously you will do anything for your child, you'll come in front of the car. So yes, of course, people will protect their children, and even others who are special to them. What I think is, the real test is, would someone stand up for someone who they're not close to? Probably that's like a real test of selflessness, because everyone wants to take care of their own. So then what about people who are alone? you know, that's the real test. So that's it for now.
Thank you. Drake, over to you, brother.
Yeah, there's a different viewpoint from Nisha on selflessness, which I don't agree with, but he sees selfishness as a sign of weakness, that it stems from the person not believing in themselves, and it's ultimately harmful to the individual that is selfless. Now, I don't see it that way. I think it could be if you go too far and you're always helping others at the neglect of yourself. But I think in general, it's very positive for people to be able to do these good acts without expecting anything back. Um, it it, uh, it feels good, which is getting something back, and it makes other people feel good, and it's positive all around for the community. But ultimately, if you're giving something of yourself to someone else, it is draining you in some way, whether you're giving help to them of some sort or anything else. But that's just sort of the difference between what Nisha is saying and what I think we've all pretty much agreed on here.
Thank you, Drake. Yes, Joe, over to you, brother.
Well, as I usually do, I have a couple of quotes drawn from polar opposite ends of the universe. I'll start with Deadpool. So in Deadpool 2, he makes a one comment. He goes, I need to become selfless. And of course, his bartender comedian friend says, I don't know what that means. And so, of course, Deadpool elaborates a little. And then the bartender interrupts, like, no, literally, I don't know what the word means. Selfless. Um, I like and I think I've used the spin as well, Kirsten, on saying, well, it doesn't mean like no self. It's less of the self, in certain contexts. I think in this get together, we're probably all in agreement. And then the other quote that I was thinking of is from one of my favorite poets that I keep bringing up. And I apologize for that, Alexander Pope. And in one long poem called The Essay on Man, which I think today he would know to call it something different, but he's a line here saying, true self-love and social are the same. So it actually picks up on a few things we've touched on. And basically what he's saying is that to be genuinely selfless and genuinely contributing to others, you have to come from a place where you are yourself. As Marcus Aurelius said, you can't be a train wreck inside and really be genuinely altruistic. picking up on that, of course, the word altruism comes from our favorite French sociologist, Auguste Comte, from the early 19th century. And I find that a very interesting place for that word to find its roots. So I would agree with everything that's been said, but I would also say that it's, and sorry, partly this is picking up and supporting a little bit of Nietzsche, but saying it's remarkably how common things that appear selfless or appear altruistic really are not. And this is, again, one of the rabbit holes Joe goes down from time. One of the things I've studied throughout history are certain events, particularly in religious history. So the Gnostics or the Cathars, or in early modern Europe, the Puritans, certain representations of Christian belief or sort of Christian adjacent beliefs, and leading right up into the 18th century and 19th century, and things called like a movement or a phenomenon called sensibility. And today, if we bring it all the way today, we'd almost call it virtue signaling, as sort of like a superficial version. But in its earlier manifestations, these outpourings always had the same structure, where people would say, well, I have a more pure and direct access to the truth. That is manifest in certain outward behaviors that mark me, sort of in Calvinist terms, almost as part of the elect. I am on the fast track to heaven, and you can see it in my actions. And that, going all the way forward to Auguste Comte and the early days of sociology, almost like pre-sociology, it frequently then manifested itself in great deals of control. And it was not always an undiluted good. So that's, and I remember unpacking certain literature, say in the late 18th century or early 19th century, just tearing it apart at a microscopic level to show that things that looked to be very, very sort of morally pure, were in fact rapaciously greedy. So it was actually selfishness expressing itself in a different way. So I think that was one of the things that Nietzsche really balked at. So I think he may not have been picking a fight with the whole concept so much as saying there is a strong thread, which he saw all over Christianity, saying, be wary of this, because if this selflessness does not come from strength and from self-love, then it probably isn't selflessness. But I'll stop there.
Thank you. Over to you, Drake.
Yeah, just wanted to pick up on what Joe was saying there with a bit of an example. When I was in the military, one of the ways every year you would have performance reviews. And these performance reviews, you got so many points for different things, and they would go towards whether or not you were going to get promoted. And one of the things they always asked on there and wanted to know was what volunteering, what things you've done for the community, charities, and that. And I normally don't talk about that because it's not up to them. It's not for them to know. But I'm doing these things because I think it's a good thing to do, not for the attention. But they want to get it because they want to say, look at our military people are doing good things. And so you get people who just do these things, not because there's any real charity inside them, not because they think it's a good thing. They do it sometimes even begrudgingly, that, yeah, I'll go out and help this so that I can put this down and get a little extra mark and have a better chance of being promoted. So that's sort of one of those things where it's just sort of the face value. It looks good, but deep down, they're not doing it for those purposes. In the end, it helps out someone, so that's good. But it's certainly not an altruistic, selfless thing. Another thing is I used to not tell anyone that I gave blood, again, because just it's not really anyone's business, and I'm not trying to show off. But seeing the great need for it, more recently I've started posting these to try and encourage people again, it's not something to get attention, but to say, hey, look, I'm doing this, and it would be great if others could, because there's always a great need for these things, right? And not wanting to go out and blow your horn and say that, yeah, look at me, but it's, hey, come on, we can all do this. It's something simple, a little bit painful, but it's not bad, right? And you do these kind of things without wanting the attention. That's the sort of altruistic way of doing it. When you're out there and trying to advertise, hey, look how good I am, I think that's where it goes from the selfless to more the selfish. You're only doing it to achieve a goal for yourself. So I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you, Drake. As per the current zeitgeist, we tend to think in a polarized manner and get trapped inside boxes or compartments. If you're not thinking positive, then you must be thinking negative. If you're not left leaning, you must be right leaning. What I'd suggest is that we try to get out of the box, like many of us here have already said in our session today. Get out of the box and understand that it's not just about selfish or selfless acts, and we don't have to justify an act as just selfish or selfless. There could be other drivers. There could be drivers that have nothing to do with the end result. Something others have already quoted here. Uh, a team of soldiers, a grenade is lobbed between them. One guy jumps on the grenade without a thought. He's not thinking of bettering himself or feeling good. He just does it instantly. So there are thoughts that are not just driven by selfishness or selflessness. It could be just duty. Or, for example, autistics. Autistics usually don't get into debates to be proved right or wrong. They're more about just establishing facts. So there could be drivers other than being selfish or selfless. And we need to maybe be able to get out of the box and look at other driving factors as well. Thank you. Denise, over to you.
Wow. Yeah. This is such an interesting topic because I still feel that kind of spectrum that exists. And, Tulip, I really resonate with what you were saying about how, if you look at things from an energetic perspective, um, you can get so excited. I mean, just even watching these little videos of people accomplishing things or watching people have a nice time or whatever it is, and then you benefit from that energy, but not in a selfish way. It's because you're connected. You can connect emotionally, and I think being able to do even what Drake was saying about just doing something in large organizations, whether it's the military, whether it's a public company, it doesn't matter. There is a lot of box ticking that happens, and people do things for the sake of it. Corporations and organizations do things for the sake of it. But I do feel that ultimately, even though there's a box to be ticked, in the end, we all have the ability to set an example of what selflessness looks like. And even just like Drake had mentioned, spreading the word about doing a selfless act could really inspire other people. I know I've certainly been inspired through my life watching what other people are doing, and without wanting any recognition, and just being very humble about it. But also, too, if you take the opposite, where someone is wanting that recognition, and you see it a lot, with social media, that seems, there's pictures and videos of everything. Look what I'm doing. But it doesn't necessarily mean that person isn't doing something good or doing something beneficial, whether it be for their community or for just anyone who benefits from what we can see. And I believe, as I said, in that energy where you really feel those emotions when someone is doing something selfless. And to come back to Tulip's question about, it's easy for me to say I jump in front of a moving car for my daughter, and any mother, I think, would probably feel the same. But you see acts of heroism, acts of just complete and utter, like Vin was saying, where people just act, and it's inherent in their being, just to protect and to help and to be of use. And that to me is really, really inspiring, really inspiring.
Yeah, no, obviously, Denise, if I were a mom, I would do the same for my kid. But I'm just saying that everyone would do that, but it's something different when you stand up for someone who's not connected with you at all. And like the soldiers, for example, they're just doing their duty, right? And I also think, I mean, I can't articulate this thought, but I'm just asking you all about, when you say selfish, I feel like things are like when things are, priced at a high, like priced higher than what they should be, or things are getting expensive. Does that come under, like, is that being selfish? Like, let me just make, profits and just, you know, sell this for this, and then there's no choice, but people have to buy it, and it's tough being out there. So is this also a selfish act, or is this something else altogether?
Oh, this is a topic I can go on at great length about, but no. Um, I'm suddenly thinking about actually a corporate experience. So I was managing one company, and the parent company was run out of the UK. And the board decided that somehow it would be a good idea if we were to donate X percentage of our revenues to a charity. And so I'm okay. But in their case, it was pure marketing fluff. It's like purely to do it to sort of be able to have something on the website. We planted 100,000 trees or whatever it was going to be. And the issue that I had at the time was that, of course, the whole group of companies, so one company, the one in Canada, was doing quite well, thank you very much. The other companies, not so much. So the whole corporate, and it was a public company, so that we had shareholders. We had people out there who'd put little bits of their retirement money into this company. Other parts were not doing very well, particularly the European offices. But anyway, so I said, well, just handing out money that we don't really have, if you look at us in aggregate, doesn't actually, it may help the 100,000 trees or whatever we want to donate to. And then I will unleash a little bit of my cynicism about the charity industry, but I'll let that go. But I said, now, if we were to do something that matched some money with something that we actually know about, and then we find a good venue to make a contribution, so in a way, that act would help build the team, would actually sort of leverage some of what we can do better than anyone else can. I said, then we're sort of building almost like the selfless side, the strength of the company to be able to go on and do more good. So I said I wanted to do more good, and I wanted it to actually have a beneficial effect upon, we'll call it the corporate self. And so we had a big fight, and in the end, I luckily won, because the company would not have survived a frivolous distribution of pretend goods, because you sort of get back to, you give away so much that there's nothing left of yourself. Have you really made a contribution, or have you just turned yourself into a charity case, as we would say? So that's an example on the corporate level. And then you've inspired me, Drake. I should get back to giving blood. I stopped for many years. I'd lived in England too long, so they were afraid I had mad cow disease. So I will look to all of you to confirm whether or not you think I have mad cow disease and whether or not I should give blood again.
Thank you, Joe. Over to you, Denise.
Yeah, just to back off of what Joe was just saying, not about the mad cow situation. He looks fine, by the way. But I work for a very large public corporation, and I was away for 2 years. So when I came back, it really astounded me how much the corporation, and how do I put this? So there's a huge amount of charitable work that the employees of the corporation I work for do. And what I noticed when I came back, because I had some time to think about this, all the personal time that people were donating to, whether it's the food bank, whether it was Habitat for Humanity. The organization I work for is doing a lot of work, and they publicly, they make it known that they're doing it. But the people who are doing it, in talking to them and seeing what they're doing, and yes, it's posted on LinkedIn and all that stuff, but they're doing it out of the goodness of their hearts because they've been doing it for years and encouraging others to help. And that was really, I keep going back to the word inspire, but it was really inspiring to me. So when Joe was just talking about corporations, what I've seen with my own is not necessarily, and they'll put money in, absolutely, and they have the ability to do so. But when I see what the employees who have families, who work long work weeks, and what they're doing to help their communities, it is really super cool, for lack of a better phrase. But it's just really it's really something to see. And so to me, that is pure selfish, being selfless rather. When I see people doing that and on a continual basis, it's very it's beautiful to see.
Thank you, Denise. Over to you, Tulip.
There's something else that came to me about being selfish now. Very often we're supposed to tip, right? Like, or some people just make it a part of it. So then sometimes you feel, okay, you've done enough shopping and you're buying things and it's just probably grocery or simple things, and or you're picking up coffee, just across. You're not asking for extra service and you're supposed to tip. And then sometimes it plays in your mind. Sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. So I don't know if that's an act of being selfish or if you're put in a spot, like who's a selfish one, I wonder, because you're already paying. That's it.
I saw a meme somewhere which said Elon Musk is worth some 400 odd billion dollars. If he gives everyone on the planet $1 billion each, that's just 8 billion of us. Won't even pinch him a bit. Yes, Denise.
Yeah, actually, Van, you bring up something that's always in debate all the time about people who have like a ridiculous amount of money and what they could do with that money, and are they being selfish by not, maybe not giving everyone on the planet X amount of dollars, but I think sometimes we also don't see what people do. And again, to Drake's point, some people are big on advertising it and other people don't. So it's really hard to place any form of judgment when we really don't know uh, what's happening on the other end when it comes to people who have the wealth to spread around to whatever is going to help humanity or the planet or animals or whatnot. So it's interesting. That's a huge. I hear it all the time in the circles that I'm in about, so and so could easily just do that or fix that or end world hunger, or when and are they being selfish by not doing that? I personally don't think, I think that's a tough card to play to some degree. So I know Joe probably has a thought on this.
Thank you. Over to you, Joe.
No, it's a great. So I think, yeah, you started it, Vin. This is a really great line to go down because, some friends of mine work at the Bill and Melinda Gates, or what's now called the Gates Foundation. So there was an example of somebody who accumulated a massive amount of money, and then, sort of shockingly, and when he finally passes, he will have spent more time giving money away than making it. And one of Bill Gates's insightful, and I don't think he's the first person to say that, but it is incredibly insightful and true. He said, "Giving money away well is harder than making money." So when you come back to the idea of selflessness, just sort of gratuitous or outrageous or unconsidered generosity can actually be quite destructive. It can be, it can be enabling of things that are really problematic. So what stands out about the Gates Foundation, and Bill Gates in particular, is how carefully they think about where can we make a contribution to this country that's going to alleviate suffering, fix problems that really don't need to be there, but not mess up the economy, not disable local capability. So in fact, it has to be surgical in a way. And there's a great book called Dead Aid about how basically Western aid has more or less destroyed the African economy and made it almost impossible for them to, rise, because they've sort of been, dumped, so that many, their agriculture, many parts of their economy have been greatly hampered by would-be selfless contributions, which are actually having the exact opposite effect. So that throughout history, there's sort of a natural law, almost an economic law, where capital tends to aggregate. It collects in places, whether it's in feudal holdings or emperors, or it has a habit of doing that. And it can be addressed in certain ways, but it's such a universal thing. But if that aggregation then leads to productivity, so let's say in the case of Gates, considered generosity or productive use, it's actually put to some focused economic use that actually helps lots of people. And say, okay, well, we may not like the fact that 8 people have so much of the world's money, but if it's really the effect. And so I'll stop.
Thank you. Yes, Denise.
So I seem to have a lot of thoughts tonight. And then the question backed onto that is, who are we to judge? Right? And not necessarily, I believe in what you just said, Joe, about being responsible, about, how you can trickle down effect, especially when it comes to economies. But, where does the judgment enter into this conversation about being selfish or selfless? I always look at things as, we all have different perspectives, right? Based on our education, our experience, our, whatever it might be. So where does judgment factor into this? Just putting that out there.
Thank you. Joe, all yours.
Okay. Yeah, no, this is a really good point. And it picks up on a couple of things we've touched on about self, and whether it's selfish or selfless, or with Alexander Pope, self-love. The concept of self, and we've touched on it in a few times in the past, of self and of consciousness. And one of the ways to talk about self, which I find is probably philosophically the most robust, is the self is a story. So some of the examples we've heard about someone in the military, and I even had my short time in the military as well, and that you become, you basically becomes part of your identity, becomes part of your story. So the rapid action in response to a threat to your team, one way or another, it's you're living out the story. This is the story that you have built. This is part of you. So even if it's a terminal action that you've thrown yourself in front of the car as a mother, you are fulfilling in some ways yourself, the story of yourself. And who judges that? How that story is something that we obviously reflect upon individually, but it's also then something that society, the group, then they remember that person did that selfless act. So let's say the soldier who throws himself on the grenade gets the Victoria Cross, after they've gone, or whatever, that there is a social recognition that story held water. But I'll stop there.
Thank you, Joe. Over to you, Drake.
Yeah, just going back to what Denise said, I know where she's coming from with that, and we should always be very considered in the information we have. But I think it's incumbent upon us to judge people that we should be judging, but carefully, because the impact people have upon others is going to be huge. If we don't judge certain people who may become our prime minister or president or whatever, then we could be getting the exact opposite of what we want. We could be harming ourselves and harming our country, harming those around us. If we don't judge billionaires based on what we know, then we could be supporting them to become even greater, which might be good and it might be bad. So whether we like it or not, we judge people every day. And no matter what anybody tells you, they're judging other people. They may have totally different standards of judging them than what we, you, me, anyone else has, but they're still judging people. And it's part of our nature, and it's very important for us personally to be safe, for everyone else to be safe and comfortable. And I think we just need to make sure we have as much information as we can. Do it considered. Don't do it in a harsh way, in a negative way, but respectfully, so that it's respectful of yourself, those around you, and the people you're judging.
Thank you, Drake. Yes, Denise.
Yeah, I can't agree more actually, because when it comes to that, it's questioning the status quo, I think, is very, very important, and that could be a whole other podcast. And just taking everything at face value and not judging or not being informed, especially as Drake, as you mentioned, when it comes to people in position of power, people who make decisions for, millions of other people. That is really, really important. So to me, taking everything at face value, it can be quite the danger. And I've had experiences in my own life where you have to question things, or the world isn't fair all the time if you don't stand up for yourself, if you don't. And then, of course, does that start falling into the category of selfishness, right? When you're trying to make a living, trying to support your disabled child, trying to, whatever it looks like, being able to, it might be viewed as selfish, but it also could be, being very aware and, as I said, challenging that status quo.
Thank you, Denise. Yes, Joe.
To end on a really happy or a very positive, let's say, a very positive constructive, several things that we've touched on have reminded me that, in fact, despite some of my sort of more sardonic or cynical early comments, that it's remarkable how often you find that people are acting selflessly and that they are giving tremendous amounts of themselves. I remember all the years I was a caregiver, and you get it into your head that you're the only one carrying a burden like that. And then you start meeting other people, and then you realize there are, and not just a lot, there are an overwhelmingly large number of people plugging away, doing the hard work as a caregiver for a parent, a child, a spouse. Like, it was remarkable. And it was, so part of our discussion has reminded me of that, saying that in small ways, so many people do go beyond their self. Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. This has been another wonderful discussion. Thank you, everybody, and looking forward to our next chat very soon. Bye-bye.